Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Sunday service of the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We're located on the ancestral lands of the Eno, Sissipaha, Shakori, Sapani, and Lumbee people. I'm Reverend Patty Hanneman. I'm a member of this congregation and serving as the transitions minister here until Reverend Brett returns in August. I want to begin by thanking everyone that has helped and is helping with this service this morning, our tech team, sound team, our musicians, everyone in the chancel this morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whether you are a longtime member or you are here for the first time or anywhere in between, we are glad you're here. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. And if you are new to this community, if this is your first time here or you've only been here a few times, we'd like to give you a resounding welcome. So if you could stand or wave your arms for us so we can recognize you, that would be great. Any newcomers this morning? Great. Thank you. Thank you. I've got a few announcements this morning I want to mention. Our Inquirers class on UU history begins today at 11:15, if any of you are interested in UU history. On Tuesday evening, the Eno River Cups group will be celebrating the summer solstice in the Commons room at 6:30. And on Wednesday evening this week, from 7 until 8:30, there will be a program sponsored by us, but led by the North Carolina area American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They're going to be talking to us about mental health for both teens and adults and how parents can support their youth. Reverend Stacy will be giving us more information about that later this morning, but I wanted to make sure you have it on your mental calendars this morning. So let's take a moment now to center ourselves, to turn off our cell phones if we need to. Take a couple of deep breaths together as we breathe in the loving energy of this beloved community and breathe out anything that might be holding us back from being fully present to this moment, to this worship experience. Let's take another breath in and out. And we now begin our worship together.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, well, I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm thinking and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm I'm thinking and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm thinking and praying with my mind, and it is a state on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You know I'm walking and talking with my mind, and it is a state on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind, and it is a state on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You know it's peace and justice with my mind stayed on freedom, and it's peace and justice with your mind stayed on freedom. Peace and justice with your mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Listen, I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was. Whoa, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Please turn and greet your neighbor. Or stand.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning, neighbor.
This house is for the ingathering of nature and human nature.
It is a house of friendships, a haven in trouble, an open room for the encouragement of our struggle.
It is a house of freedom, guarding the dignity and worth of every person.
It offers a platform for the free voice, for declaring both in times of security and danger, the full and undivided conflict of opinion.
It is a house of truth-seeking, where scientists can encourage devotion to their quest, where mystics can abide in a community of searchers.
It is a house of art, adorning its celebrations with melodies and handiworks.
It is a house of prophecy, outrunning times past and present in visions of growth and progress.
This house is a cradle for our dreams, the workshop of our common endeavor.
In this house we hold so dear. Let us create this sacred space together with the lighting of our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. I invite us all to stand as we're able and sing our opening hymn together, Hush. It will be on the screen.
Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? You know it sounds like a freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like a justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? You know that early soon one morning, death come creeping in my room. Soon one morning, death comes creeping my room. Soon one morning, death comes creeping my room. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? You know that I'm so glad trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. Oh my Lord, what shall I do?
I'd like to invite all the children and young at heart down to the chancel floor for a story. Who would like to join me this morning? Come on down. Good morning. Good morning. Anybody else want to join me for a story? Come on down. Join us. Welcome. Hey. Who knows what we are celebrating today? Yeah. Father's Day, that's right. We're celebrating Father's Day. And there's another holiday today called Juneteenth, which is fairly brand new, so we don't know much about it. So I thought this morning what I would do is share the story of Juneteenth with you all. And it is a true story about a woman named Opal Lee and what she did to start this great holiday called Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth Jamboree. Come and join the fun, Opal Lee waved to her great-grandson as he barreled across the park. He zipped past lines of picnic tables covered with platters of barbecue, baked beans, tomato tarts, and raspberry cobbler. He hurried past a leaping choir draped in purple robes. He danced a jig with cowboys playing fiddles, but they didn't stop his flow. Buddy ran to the blooming tree where Opal Lee held court. Her braided hair was a silver crown. Her eyes are twinkling stars. Great granddeer, Buddy called. Tell us a Juneteenth story. Opal Lee raised her face to the sun as memories of yesteryear filled her vision. When she had been a Texas bud like the children at her feet, Granddaddy Zach told freedom stories on his wooden porch. And as Opal Lee remembered his words, she lifted her hands and cheered. Juneteenth means freedom. And now it's story time. Then Opal Lee began. Once upon a blazing sun, black bodies were bought and sold like cattle. Black men plowed the fields, but were not allowed to own the land. Black women cooked the food, but were not allowed to feast on roast and ribs from the master's table. Black children cleaned the one-room schoolhouses, but were not allowed to read or write. Earning and learning were against the law. Slavery was a thief. American slavery dragged on like a plague until January 1st, 1863. That's when President Lincoln wielded courage and raised his feathered pen. He signed the Emancipation Proclamation with a mighty stroke. Glory, glory, glory. Freedom was dazzling news like a bright, starry night. However, Texas was big and many miles away from Mr. Lincoln. White masters defied his words. Black bodies remained in bondage. They plowed, they cooked, they cleaned. Freedom did not ring throughout Texas in 1863. It was toiling times in the Lone Star State. For 2 years, 5 months, and 18 more weary days. Then finally, joy jumped up on dancing feet in the Gulf town of Galveston. The year was 1865. The day was June 12th. Gordon Granger marched through Galveston with Union Army troops, and the general raised his booming voice and spoke these righteous words. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Opal Lee danced in a circle. Freedom, hope, and joy divine. Juneteenth means it's freedom time. Can you imagine the excitement? Singing filled the air. Happy tears rolled down like rain. Black families leaped through cotton fields and played tambourines. It was a day of jubilee, perfect for Texas barbecue, watermelon, and sweet potato pie, delicious delights they had been denied during their servitude. Opal Lee told the children, remember my words for safekeeping. Remember what I say. Juneteenth is bigger than Texas, singing or dancing bands. Juneteenth is freedom rising, and freedom is for everyone. Juneteenth is you and me. As the children clapped and cheered, Buddy tugged her sleeve. Great-granddear, he called, what was Juneteenth like when you were a kid? And Opal Lee unwrapped another story. Blacks and whites lived separately when I was a child. Jim Crow signs littered old Fort Worth in every public space. Black families were banned from Forest Park Zoo except one day of the year. On Juneteenth, we could picnic, party, and ride the Ferris wheel. I hated that zoo. I loved it, too. The birdhouse was my favorite. Buddy groaned and shook his head. The old days don't sound good. Good and bad work together like the sun and rain. I spent good days on my granddaddy's porch reading poetry books. His farm was my playground. I ran across the fields and climbed the tallest oak. Glory, glory, glory. Some memories are chocolate sweet, but some memories cut and bruise. My saddest season started on Juneteenth Day, 1939. An angry mob with flaming sticks burned my family's brand new house. Their broken minds and evil hearts were so afraid of Black progress. The police made no arrests. My family moved away. And yet the embers burned. That fire still lives in me. I learned a big lesson that Juneteenth Day, freedom is a golden coin. Struggle makes it shine. And no matter how long it takes for freedom to stretch across the land, I will keep on teaching. I will keep on reaching. I will keep on walking. I will keep on talking. I will raise my voice on the prairie and the mountaintop until freedom rings. The children lifted their hands in praise. Freedom, hope, and joy divine. Juneteenth means it's freedom time. Opal Lee winked and chuckled. I think now it's time for barbecue, strawberry cake, and red Juneteenth punch. Glory, 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 Buddy cheered and waved his hands. When he bounced up to leave, Opal Lee hugged him tightly. Then, just like birds in flight, all the children flocked into her arms. Opal Lee studied their shining faces. Black, brown, bronze, gold, tan, white, freckles. As the children dashed away, she marveled at the bright future. She rested against the blooming tree and whispered into the wind, remember my words for safekeeping. Remember what I say. Freedom is for everyone. Juneteenth is you and me. And that's the story of Juneteenth. And I am going to invite you now to leave the sanctuary. And we've got Miss Pam and others are going to do some singing with you. So thank you for listening, and I invite you to leave our sanctuary. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Warm greetings to each and all of you this beautiful morning. I want to talk a bit about an offering for our community that's being held this Wednesday evening from 7 to 8:30 p.m., June 22nd, in our fellowship hall across the way. We at ERUF care about members of our beloved community and those beyond our walls, individuals and families who have been weathering these 2.5 years of the COVID pandemic. It's been a time of unprecedented change and has required each of us and all of us collectively to be creative and resourceful in how we go about our day-to-day living. It's been stressful at best. And while we've been adapting quite better than some of us might have imagined, we still experience the challenges in various ways in our daily life. In response to our awareness of the various mental health challenges that may present during such stressful times, we're welcoming the area North Carolina Director of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, Catherine English, and the past director, Betsy Rhodes, to our campus on Wednesday as they present an important program on mental health. They will engage in conversations with both adults and with teens about mental health issues, addressing awareness of behaviors, the importance of self-care, and how best to reach out for help. Presenters will also share how parents can support youth, as well as important resources and warning signs for both teens and adults. All high school youth, adults, parents are encouraged to attend this important offering. In addition to whole group learning, we will have a separate breakout session for youth and one for adult discussion. Each group will be facilitated by one of our presenters. To help us prepare, setup, and handouts, you're encouraged to register, though no one will be turned away at the door on Wednesday night. This program is for each and all of you, as you are called. For those of you who may be thinking about attending or perhaps are hearing about this for the first time, if you go to ERUF's website and look at the calendar section of the website, you'll see a link to the program where you can sign up. This is a wonderful opportunity for us as we support one another as beloved community in seeking the resources to help us when we face those difficult situations in our lives. Please share this information with others at ERUF and in the wider community. Thank you very much.
A kind comment from my wife, Lenora, sent me to the back of the closet to dig out this world's greatest dad tie. Each June, my wife would take the kids to the headquarters store for the Save the Children, and I would get a new Father's Day tie to wear proudly. The eye-catching designs are adapted from drawings done by children the charity serves. This collection, now spanning more than a decade, is one of my dearest possessions, and despite retiring and eschewing ties, has survived multiple downsizing purges. Lenore and I recently returned from a road trip to Yellowstone, fortunately ahead of the disastrous flooding that has closed all access roads to the park. On the way back, while in Salt Lake City, I visited the LDS Family History Library, a renowned genealogical research center, to resume my on-again, off-again search for my long-lost cousin, the son of my father's brother. Over the years, I have sporadically tried to connect with this relative, a man I have never met, but one of my only 2 first cousins. In recounting my family history to the researcher helping me, I was reminded that the root of this disconnect is that I come from a line of less than exemplary fathers. My ne'er-do-well alcoholic grandfather triggered a sequence of estrangements, financial struggles, and hidden emotional pain when he abandoned his wife and 2 young sons. One outcome, though, was that several years ago, discovering that others had similar stories, I hit on the idea of a Blue Father's Day service, modeled on Blue Christmas services, designed to address that emotional pain by acknowledging it and sharing the common threads in our very human stories. To clarify, this is not that Blue Father's Day service. This is merely a few random reflections brought to mind by the occasion. Importantly, when I am asked to share a particularly spiritual and meaningful word, that word is always family. So please take today's words in that context. Like pulling my tie out of the closet to appreciate my family once again, we learn by exploring the human experiences that we all share. Many years ago, I attended a Father's Day service at my previous UU congregation. During joys and sorrows, a dear friend with a large, loving family enthused for some minutes on the many endearing attributes of her father. As she spoke, I felt a sharp pain in my heart. The primary emotion was simple jealousy. She had something that I desperately wanted. However, the jealousy was tinged with another strong sense of being cheated. Something I was owed by the world had been stolen from me. While I had a father in my life, something was missing. Being abandoned by his father in the hardscrabble life that followed had left my father incapable of expressing love. In fact, some of his last words to me before he died was to call me a clown for going to grad school instead of getting a job. The pain I felt that Father's Day as my friend spoke glowingly about her father was a seed for the idea of a Blue Father's Day service. I know I am not alone, and I want to help others process that shared pain. I do not begrudge my friend her joy. The purpose of a Blue service is not that there be less joy in the world. Rather, it is to reaffirm that we, as humans, experience both joy and sorrow. While we may not feel them simultaneously, they coexist within our community. Blue Christmas services came about because the holidays amp up joy and light, and that sharpens the painful edges that the shadows cast on the hearts of those in pain. In Blue services, those in pain are validated, while others are reminded that their compassion needs to be heightened along with their joy. My intent is that a Blue Father's Day service would teach us that that validation and compassion are needed year-round. In thinking about my relation to Father's Day and to my father, I came to realize that parenting is about meeting the needs of the child, not bending the child to the needs of the parent. This is best done by modeling positive values and productive behaviors while being sensitive to the individual needs of the child. Life gave Lenore and I 2 polar opposite children to drive that point home. When people try to raise children in their own image, they're playing God in a destructive way as they suppress the needs of the child in an effort to justify themselves. For his part, my father was cheated by life, cheated out of his father. Although his mother was a good and deeply religious person, each of them went through life suppressing their unneed met for love by not expressing love. Having seen alcoholism modeled, my father turned to the bottle when disease added physical pain to his emotional scars. When his drinking didn't cloud his judgment, a state increasingly rare as time went on, my father did have fundamentally good moral values and indeed had made some good life decisions. Despite that, I was cheated out of a parent who could say, "I love you." Instead, I saw alcohol-addled sarcasm and verbal abuse modeled. However, Father's Day is not just an occasion for looking respectively at our fathers, retrospectively. It is also about looking forward to the next generation that we have parented. Our true legacy is not what we as a generation have accomplished. Rather, it is what the next generation will accomplish. What will they forge with the tools we as parents and as community have given them? In that vein, I received what is my best ever Father's Day present while I was in Salt Lake City. Our daughter, a 30-something single woman working full-time as a postdoc, has spent the last year getting qualified as a foster parent, a way to make the world a better place. This April, as soon as the paperwork was complete, our Elizabeth became the foster parent of a teenager, a 17-year-old Black woman named Ace, with the pronouns she, they. Ace's particulars are confidential, and Lenore and I quickly learned to be comfortable not knowing the whole story. In May, headed west towards Salt Lake City, we wondered what role we would play as Ace adjusted to living with our Elizabeth. We resigned ourselves, however, to not being in control. A couple days before we arrived, we were told that Ace wanted us in her life as grandparents, which was a slingshot event for us. We had a wonderful visit, as Ace immediately bonded with our Bella, went to the Tetons with us, and told Elizabeth how much she was like her mother. The night before we left Utah, as we were saying goodbye, Ace ran to me with open arms. Shouting, "Grampy," they gave me a big, enveloping hug. The warm feeling in my heart made me know I had come full circle in my relationship with Father's Day. It was no longer about what my father had or hadn't done for me. What matters was what I could do for Elizabeth and Ace, and what they could do for the world. The next day, as we drove home, an interview on NPR provided me with the epilogue for my Blue Father's Day service. While discussing renewed interest in Stoicism, blogger Ryan Holiday referenced the Roman emperor and Stoic, Marcus Aurelius. In Meditations, Aurelius gives this advice, quoted in the original gendered language, but generalizable. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. I won't waste any more time, as the takeaways are simple. First, be joyful yet mindful, as there is always pain deserving of your compassion in the hearts around you, if not in your own. Second, while it is important to look back with reverence and clear-eyed analysis at the generations that have come before, the ancestors, it is more important to look forward, recognizing that we influence what the next generation will do to make the world a better place. In closing, if you are a father on this Father's Day, you are blessed. If you had a father in your life, you are also blessed. But remember, for many of us, that is a mixed blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that profound reflection. I invite all of us to join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation as I reflect on the words of Anne Forster. The ringing of a bell calls us to worship. The pounding of a drum calls us to war. The popping of a cork calls us to celebration. What is the sound that calls us to hear one another? Listen. Listen carefully. It is here, in the silence. Listen deeply. The beating of our own hearts calls us to ourselves, calls us to be our true selves, calls us to be our best selves, calls us to be what we might become. Listen. There is another sound. The breath of our neighbor calls us outside ourselves, calls us to be companions, calls us to allies, calls us to partners. Listen. We must heed the call of our own hearts, where love and truth, caring and justice are born. Listen. We must heed the call of others to gather together for some great purpose, where passion and fidelity, compassion and equity are nourished. Today, in our beloved community, we honor the fathers of our lives, those of our lineage, as well as those father figures who have guided us through our lives. We hold in our hearts with great tenderness all who are navigating life's challenges of illness or loss. And we rejoice with those celebrating the many joys of life. Barbara and Jonathan Sheline are delighted to announce the birth of their grandchild, Corinne Sheline, on June 5th to their daughter, Annelle Sheline, and her husband, Daniel Rodriguez. J.M. Tramonton and Summer Anderson are excited to share that they welcomed their first child, Owen Lewis Tramonton, who was born May 26th. May we gather all these joys along with our own unspoken prayers and join our hearts together for a moment of silence as we listen. The hammering silence calls us together that we may do the work we cannot do alone. Let us heed the calls that come in the silence. that we may be well and do good in this world together. May it be so. Ashe. Amen.
I chose to read an extra long story this morning, so we might go over a little bit. I hope that's all right with all of you. But I will get us out of here before the Inquirers class starts at 11:15, I promise. May nothing evil cross this door is the first line of the first hymn in our gray hymnal. How many of you believe in evil? Not many of us do, but I want to ask if anybody has been watching the hearings this week. Unitarian Universalists don't talk much about evil, and my guess is that many of you listening this morning would say you don't believe in evil or even sin. But I entered seminary just after 9/11, and we found that our movement was grappling with trying to describe what had happened that day. And part of that grappling was that the UU World, which is our quarterly magazine, published an article in which they asked some of our most insightful ministers to give a definition of evil. Gordon McKeeman wrote, "Evil comes into the world when our good comes into conflict with another's good." William Jones wrote, "Evil is a label, a term for someone else's interests that conflict with our own." Tendeka wrote, "Evil is the failure to understand the inherent worth and dignity of every person as part of the interdependent web of which we are a part." And shortly after this article was written, the faculty of Meadville Lombard Theological School, where I was a student, decided to put together an ethics course they called Evil, Trauma, and Ambiguity. The first day of class, our professor asked how many of us believed in evil, and very few hands went up. But the people who raised their hands then were asked to give a definition of evil. And since we all read the UU World, we kind of parroted some of those definitions that you just heard me read. But then she asked each of us to tell a story about an evil we had witnessed or experienced in our own lives. And one by one, the students opened up and told some of the most horrific stories. And after we had told those stories, she asked us, "So, do any of the definitions you have just given me begin to touch the pain of those experiences that you just described?" Last week, we began our series of reflections on what it means to build a faith community that is life-giving and hope-sustaining within a liberal, progressive context. And I talked about the Judeo-Christian myth of the first earthlings in paradise and how their greed and longing for more made them turn their backs on paradise. And that this longing was the beginning of human suffering. I glossed over the conversation between Eve and the serpent. But today, as we're discussing evil, I want to come back to that moment to examine more closely what it might tell us about the human condition. So we come back to that darned snake. You know, in the West, we tend to think of snakes as associated with malevolence, even Satan. And so we have come to think of that snake in the garden as a tempter for evil acts. During medieval times, even dragons were an ever-present danger, and every knight had to test his mettle in slaying a dragon. But in the East, serpents, and especially dragons, are associated with wisdom. And this is true in many indigenous cultures today as well. They are benevolent beings, watching over and protecting something of great value. So with these two very different ways of looking at serpenthood, I come back to the story and I ask, what was the intention of the writers of Genesis when they put that serpent in the garden? Could it be that the snake was not tempting Eve, but guarding and protecting that tree of knowledge, and then invited Eve to partake of that knowledge? In fact, this is what many Jewish teachings tell us today. They say that the serpent in the garden was actually a catalyst for an important transformation that Adam and Eve needed to go through. Eve is urged to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and then suddenly she recognizes herself as distinct from the other creatures in the garden, with a consciousness of what she is capable of. She recognizes herself suddenly as the incarnation of the divine, but also with the freedom to ignore that divinity. She is given moral agency, but also she knows now that she can act in ways that are not consistent with that moral agency. All of this she shares with Adam, and they clothe themselves. They put on and accept their full humanity. And they recognize that they have both divinity and the capacity for evil. And with this new wisdom, what is their reaction? They are ashamed, which I think perhaps is the appropriate response to the realization of the havoc that each of us is capable of causing. I wish there were a little bit more ashamed faces in the hearings that we've been seeing on the news recently. And here's my definition, my partial definition of evil. It is the betrayal of another human being. It is an act that frustrates or discourages the healing or wholeness of someone and prevents them from flourishing. It destroys the selfhood and the souls of others. It is as common as that weed that crops up in the middle of your garden in the middle of the night that you have to keep plucking out in order for your garden to thrive. It cannot be confined to evildoers, lest we believe we can rid ourselves of it by getting rid of them. The possibility of evil resides in every human heart, which is what Adam and Eve recognized in order to be fully human. I suspect that we Unitarian Universalists are content with our rather benign definitions of evil because we are historically a privileged people, and so we don't expect evil to enter our lives. We don't run across it enough that we get used to staring it in the face, and we don't learn how to recognize it or be resilient in its wake. We don't learn what it takes to build strength of soul. My journey toward what it takes to build strength of soul began over 20 years ago when I took a class at Duke University called African American Autobiography. And because I didn't read the description of the class that well, I thought we were going to be studying the autobiographies of Black people, but instead it was actually a class for Black students to learn how to write their own stories. And so I ended up being the only white face in the room. But I will be forever grateful for the grace with which the other students accepted me in that sacred space of storytelling. And I heard many stories that semester of how racism had affected their lives and the resilience that they learned and the strength of soul they had in facing that reality. And one of my most memorable moments was the day we were studying one of Maya Angelou's poems, and I asked a question: do you think she meant this or this? And the professor got her phone out, she dialed a number, and she said, Maya, I've got a student here with a question for you. I don't remember what my question was, but I remember very well her answer. She laughed very heartedly. And then she said, oh, you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. Because that's what we do. We take in what life gives us, and we make our own way. We take in what life gives us, and we make our own way. That is resilience. That's strength of soul. Years later, when I was the minister of the Hillsborough UU congregation, I spent an evening with some other clergy as we gathered to talk about how we could work with the Orange County school system to try to get more people of color on their staff and in their with their teachers and the rest of their staff. And we left that church that night, and shortly after, a cross was burned on their front yard. This was just a few years ago. And when I called on their pastor the next day, appalled, he shrugged. And he said, "We'll move through it." And I must have given him a puzzled look, because then he added, "In the shelter of one another, we move through these things." Sheltering one another in the face of hard times is one of our responsibilities as a faith community. It's important that we build resilience and strength of soul into the ways that we gather together. The kinds of things that can ravage a life take many forms: poverty, illness, deprivation, prejudice, abuse, neglect. When people walk through the doors of our sanctuary, we never know how their lives might have been ravaged this week. Whether they walk through for the first time or they've been here lots of times, we don't know what they have faced, and we don't know what they might need to release them from that experience. People come to our communities seeking something. Salvation, maybe. The Hebrew word for salvation means to make wide a path, and it's connected to words like spaciousness, deliverance, rescue, liberation, freedom. Perhaps people come to us because their path has become too narrow. They don't feel enough space, psychic, physical, or spiritual, and they can't function as a free human being, a whole human being. When people find themselves in those tight places and their lives feel at risk, we can provide a space, that extended human hand and the shelter of one another, so that that wall that they've been facing becomes an open door. We can gather in celebration of our divine nature, our better nature. We can dance and sing and laugh together. And in that act of celebration, of being in community together, modeling what it looks like and feels like to be whole again, we can begin the process of building resilience and strength of soul. You know, for 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, Opal Lee walked across America collecting signatures for her petition to the U.S. Congress. It was a journey replete with rejection and disappointment. But she recognized the importance of not only remembering the evils of slavery, but the need for celebrating the resilience of the human spirit. When she was 94 years old, President Joe Biden signed legislation to make Juneteenth a national holiday, with Opal Lee at his side. Her constant reminder that none of us are free until all of us are free, and we aren't free yet, should be our mantra as we think about what it means to make a wide path. We have a divine invitation to transform all manner of nasty human behavior into song and celebration. I invite us to do that now. I would like the ushers to come forward as we as we collect our morning offering and we begin singing together.
You know this, and you can pick it up pretty easily by listening to me. So when you get it, sing it. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. Love for all right now. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. Peace for all right now. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. Truth for all right now. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. As for me and my house, you will find us serving. As for me and my house, you will find us serving love. Love for all right now. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. As for me and my house, you will find us serving peace. Peace for all right now. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. As for me and my house, you will find us serving truth. Truth for all right now. Let there be peace for all right now. Let there be love for all right now.
Joan, and thank you all for your contributions this morning. It is greatly appreciated. Our closing hymn this morning will be on your screen. I Know I Can. Joan, I'm going to make you get up again so that we can sing this hymn together. Please rise and body your spirit as we sing together.
Please sing out. My sister in my heart.
May the love which overcomes all brokenness, which heals all wounds, be around us and within us as we leave this sacred space. Go in peace, my friends.